And good evening, everyone. John Russell and Cal Van Single from the Greater Muskegon Sports Network. Have Scott DeCamp of CatchMark SportsNet, and we have our guest villain is Andy,
oh boy,
Andy Roberts of the White Lake Beacon and Oceana Herald Journal. Again, comes back for another bite of the apple.
Yeah, glad I didn't wear out my welcome the first time.
Not at all. It was a good time. Well, we're going to, again, with the fact of having a solid game, rivalry game, I guess, is this week we're going to do pretty much what we did last week, except we're going to kind of reverse order a little bit. We're going to save the West Michigan Conference for our last go-round, as we're going to really spend some time with Whitehall taking on Montague in that Battle of the Bell. So we'll start back where we usually start with the OK Green and spend a little bit of time on this one. All the hype for this game and the OK Green was Muskegon over Mona Shores, and it really was living up to all of the hype there for what basically the first half, and then Muskegon kind of pulled away there 49-28.
Yeah, it was about big plays and Muskegon's explosion. And that's really what it came down to. It was 21-21. Shores was driving to score late first half. And one of the receivers caught about a 20-yard pass or so and got stripped on the play. Ball's lying there on the turf, and Damari Foster comes along, scoops it up, and takes it to the house, 81 yards or whatever it was. And that was the first big turning point. And then that took him into halftime, 27-21. And then Muskegon gets it, scores first drive, go up 2 touchdowns. Shores responds, takes it all the way down, gets it down to like the half-yard line and gets stopped on 4th down. And then very next play, you had Jake Price, boom, 99 yards gone. And that effectively ended it right there. I mean,
took the air out of the blue.
It was still, you still could have maybe seen a comeback, but that really put it completely in Muskegon's hands at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And Muskegon's speed. I mean, we talk about it all the time. How do you practice for speed unless you get somebody out there in a golf cart or something like that? It doesn't seem fair.
They're faster than a golf cart.
yeah, that's true. That is true. But,
and then it's not only one; it's 2 of them.
Yeah.
I mean, Piggy and Jacoby both. I mean, wow, they fast, both sophomores. They can fly.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're getting better every week too.
Yeah.
Muskegon's getting better every week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think the offensive line is gelling. They got the big kid back, I think 2 weeks ago. That was a big plus for him. And I think they're just getting better and better. They kind of got, Shane said that they get smacked in the mouth a little bit against Gas Tech, and rightfully so. They were huge. I was like, oh my, well, we were there together going, oh man, is this college team or what?
Yeah, that Gas Tech, that I don't know that they played as well as that the rest of the year, but they've had some COVID issues and different stuff going on. They've kind of had a really up and down season just because of COVID and other things going on, but that was as good as they've probably looked all year, I would imagine, Gas Tech. But to Muskegon's credit, they've really grown since then, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
A one-sided loss there doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world to Mona Shores. I mean, I'm thinking of just a few years ago, and Shores winds up winning the state title, and I'm sure that's what Coach Koziak's kind of hanging his hat on now.
Yeah, it was 53-0. I covered that one. That was 2 years ago. And at that point,
so you're the problem up here.
Well, I'm a problem. Is that a newsflash to you? I'm a problem everywhere I go. Just ask our tech guys when something happens with my laptop every day. What'd you do, Scott? But yeah, that's 53-0 2 years ago at Shores, and to their credit, they got back off the mat and made a great run to their first ever state title. So it can happen. And Shores, I think, has a really good team still. Is Muskegon 21 points better if you played this game 10 times? I don't think so.
Right.
But at the same time, Muskegon impressed me with how much they've improved since week 2. And Shores, I think, still a good team. I think Mark Konechny, senior quarterback, he might have been perhaps the most impressive player I saw on the field when you count all things. There are a lot of great performers in that game, but he rushed for 120 or almost 120, passed for 215.
Right.
He showed his toughness too. He took a lot of hits, but kept sticking his nose in there. He was an impressive player. But yeah.
And I think I saw a quote from Shane where he was talking about, you can look around here and you're not necessarily seeing, even though it's a nice rivalry and all that stuff, you're not seeing Muskegon beat Shores. You're seeing, when you're talking the totality of the year, he says, you still want to be playing for that state championship. He said, this is very nice and all that stuff. and we got it in the win column. You certainly want to win it more than you want to lose it. But you can tell they're two programs that, yes, this is a great rivalry, obviously, but they're bigger fish to fry. I mean, when it comes to the whole thing, I mean, it's all good to talk about. It's good for the media, for us to kind of speculate what's going to happen and what's happening here, and maybe the stories behind the stories. But both of these teams are okay. Hey, we played it. One of us won, one of us lost. Now let's go on for like the second part of the season.
Yeah, I think I think Muskegon's whole point in this is that just kind of what you said. It's a big game for them, but it's the next game on their schedule. Now, I still see it as a rivalry because I can pretty much guarantee that Muskegon doesn't want to lose that game.
Right.
It's going to ruin their weekend if they do.
Yeah.
But they'll move on, and Shores needs to do the same thing. They'll have to move on, and I still think it's a great thing for the community. Just when both teams are good like that, both programs are good,
Right.
which they are. So I think in that way it's definitely a rivalry. If you look at the one-loss thing, maybe not, but
Right.
I think they're two premier programs in the state, so I think that's a rivalry.
Separated only by a few miles, and you look at Shores, it's costly loss for them, and the conference title, they more than likely lost that chance. But they probably lost one, maybe two playoff games because of it too, and that's also very, very big. You want to have that. Shores, I'm sure, travels well, but you really want to play on your home turf, if you can. And that's probably, I don't know how many yet. I think we won't know for a while yet, but probably one, maybe two, because they certainly would have got a lot of points if they could have beaten Muskegon to help them, host one or two more games also.
I feel like our guest needs to chime in on this. He's been kind of sitting over there.
Sure, yeah. You guys were all there. I'm just watching from afar. But yeah, Muskegon. I mean, you mentioned Scott, and I'm sure it's not really a rivalry, but it had to jack them up that so many people. I mean, I think a couple in this panel included predicted Mona Shores were going to win that game. It had to fire up Muskegon to sort of prove people wrong because they don't get a chance to do that much. Right. People aren't picking them to lose all that much, and they just brutalized them up front too. 448 yards rushing, I think it was. I mean, you can hardly do that against air, let alone a team the caliber of Mona Shores. So I thought that really spoke volumes to the mindset of Muskegon in that game.
Is there such a thing as a good loss from Mona Shores' perspective?
There can be, and I guess it depends on how you respond. Off that.
Right.
Maybe it's easier to say, in hindsight, whether it was a good loss or not, but. I think he's right, though. Andy's right. You look at one of the big keys going into the game was tackling in space and just keeping those big plays in front of them. They weren't able to do that because not only did they have the long touchdown runs, but they had, I don't know if it was like 5 plays of 50 or more yards or something like that. Like even a simple pass would turn into a big play or something like that. So they just couldn't. You got to come up and be sure tacklers and then make those plays in space, which against Muskegon is easier said than done.
Yeah, exactly. I go back to several years ago where Muskegon and Shores played, I think, the first week of the playoffs. And help me out here, Cal. Was that a game that Shores won or Muskegon won? Because I remember I made the comment they were shaking hands, Koziak and Shane, and the one that lost, or the one that won during the regular season. Again, I said, man, well, that would have been the team that lost. So I'm screwing the story all up. But the whole point of it was, I says, they won the conference championship, but I got the feeling that, the loser of this is saying, you know what? I would put that conference championship away if we had one more chance to beat you and go into the playoffs. My point of that whole thing was, I think playoffs have become such a thing right now, and it started our debate over what's more important. I think Cal's more old, and we're more old school, where a conference championship meant something, and it still does. Don't get me wrong, but in the whole scheme of things, when you make that trip all the way to Detroit, win that state championship, or even finish as runner-up, I mean, how many people outside of the people in the program really realize, hey, yeah, you won the league championship? I mean, I think it's. You go ahead, Scott.
No, and I think the year you're alluding to is 2015.
Thank you.
Shores beat them in Week 8, beat Muskegon in Week 8, 21-18. They played 3 weeks later, and Muskegon got them in the district final, 21-10.
That's it.
Now, neither team went to the finals that year because the next week Muskegon lost at Lowell to a really good Lowell team. But that was why are you laughing?
You know why I'm laughing.
Let's see.
Oh, the sprinklers were left on. Sorry.
Well, you talk, Cal, about, or John, excuse me, about can it be a good loss? A timely reference here since they lost last weekend, but Nick Saban has the famous quote, never waste a loss.
Right.
And this is their chance to reset themselves, to figure out what went wrong, and maybe they come back and, they're not in the same division, correct?
Sure.
So it set them on a long playoff run as a result.
I was really, for the longest time, really thought that winning your conference was probably the most important thing. I was very fortunate to be on a team that won a conference title. Was just a small part of that team. We had some great players on that team. So you are forever, you're your conference champ, even though I was back in the fall of '76. Here's where I'm switching a little bit on it. Because now, if you make a playoff run, especially a long run, week 4, week 5, you're bringing all these sophomores up, and you're getting an extra 4 to 5 weeks together with them, and you're instilling your offense for the next year. So when these kids, when August comes back around, these kids are way ahead of a team that maybe went out or was done in week 9 or maybe week 10, and that's so helpful.
Yeah, that's a huge benefit. That's like, it's not the same, but like if you see college football programs, they want so badly to go to a bowl game because you get that extra month or whatever of practice, and that development's just so key.
And it's a good point too, Cal, because Montague, as we talk about, we're going to talk about Montague Whitehall later. Montague's team last year had a lot of guys that played on the 2019 team that made it to the semifinals and had that heartbreaking loss. So, and they had that picture pinned up on the practice field. So not only did they get the big run, but they also got a hefty chunk of motivation going into the next season.
See, I make good points once in a while.
Yeah.
You're just setting them up and he's knocking them down.
Yeah, that's right.
There we go.
Just as we move ahead here, Mona Shores is taking on Holland this week, and then they finish the season with Wyoming. So obviously they have two teams that they would figure to handle. Muskegon's got that rivalry game with Reese Puffer. Puffer handling Holland 48 to 20.
I'll kick that over to Andy.
Yeah.
He covers Reese Puffer probably
Yeah,
more than I do.
I happened to be at that game because it was homecoming, and you got to get the pictures of the king and queen for our print publication. But yeah, they romped in that game, 48-20. Brody Johnson had 241 yards rushing, and he only played 2.5 quarters. He got hurt. He had an ankle injury. He was on crutches at the end of the game. Not sure what his status is. It may or may not matter because they're playing Muskegon, but obviously you'd love to have him and to give him your best chance. But what struck me is the first 3 Reese Puffer possessions, they only had the ball for about 3.5, 4 combined minutes in those possessions, and all of them ended with Ben Weil hitting a different receiver on a go route for a touchdown. So it was almost like they were toying with Holland in that game. Obviously, it had to be nice for them after a couple of rough weeks prior to that.
Sure, exactly. So that's our OK Green. The standings, of course, now Muskegon on top all by themselves, 5-0, 6-1 with Mona Shores, 4-1, 5-2 in Zeeland East, who Muskegon finishes up with to end the season. They're 4-1 and 5-2. Let's move to the OK Blue here, and Fruitport got Holland Christian 52-16. Fruitport having, I guess, quietly a decent season compared to where they've come from over the last few years. But again, much like the OK Green or any of those OK conferences, it's a brutal conference to have to reload or rebuild in.
Yeah, and they're 3-4, but they're still kicking in the playoff picture.
The last team in, I believe.
Yeah, they're right there. Which they got Allendale this week, and that's a game I think they can win, maybe even should win. Yeah. And that will put them at 4 wins, and then they play against Unity in week 9. That's a tall order for anybody. Right. So, but even if they get this win this week, and even if they lose in week 9, I think that still puts them in the discussion, puts them maybe right on that cusp of getting in the playoffs, just because of the new system that's based on strength of schedule rather than record. So I think, they've got some playmakers, so they're kind of a fun team to watch, I think. Yeah. They just, like you said, playing a tough league, and had a tough schedule outside of that. Had Cadillac on top of the tough league schedule, so they should be battle tested.
Spring Lake and Coopersville, very close game here. Spring Lake winds up persevering 27 to 20 in that battle of that. Had all these guys bunched up for first place in the OK Blue. Kind of a thriller there. Spring Lake's magical season continues.
Yeah, Alex Lee had a monster game, 179 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks. He's done everything. Even in the week before, I covered him against Unity. He had a great game. He runs really hard, because they're playing right now without Christian Folker, who's like a 2-time All-Area player. So that was a nice win for them over Coopersville to bounce back from that Unity loss.
Got an interesting game against West Catholic, and West Catholic, I guess I could lump this in here. Not surprised that Unity Christian beat West Catholic, but surprised by the point spread, 40 to 14. So you can see this Spring Lake West Catholic game is going to obviously be an interesting one.
Anyway, you got any thoughts on that one?
Sure. Not a lot. I mean, you look at the comparative scores between Coopersville. I know West Catholic barely got by them too. So these teams look to be pretty evenly matched. But you mentioned Alex Lee. He's like the 3rd string running back, I think, because the backup also got hurt for Spring Lake. So the fact that they just kind of pulled him up and he's tearing apart Coopersville like that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it really is. And then, so that's where we're at with the OK Blue. We'll move on to Grand Haven's representation in the OK Red. They wind up getting beat by Hudsonville by the score of 49 to 14 to fall to 2-3 in the conference, 3-4 overall.
Yeah, Ryan Francis, senior running back, was a bright spot for him. 169 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 17 carries. That's their, I want to say, it's their 3rd straight loss for them. You know, it's such a brutal league.
Yeah.
And they got Kentwood this week, so I think that's a chance. They go over to Kentwood. They have a chance to get back in the winning column this week, but then I believe they finish with Rockford. So again, they're diving right back into it again after this week.
They were the feel-good, so one of the feel-good stories of the fall here about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. They were like, wow, we were talking about them. I think one of us kind of said, look who they got coming up. We're going to find out really how good they are. They're struggling a little bit now again.
These OK teams have to be like, can we get a break? Do we have to play these stud teams every week out of conference too?
Yeah.
My good Lord.
Yeah.
Lake State will move over there. Muskegon Catholic handling Manistee by the score of 34 to nothing. So Muskegon Catholic continues to roll 3-0, 6-1 overall.
Yeah, that clinched the outright Lake State title. I mean, there's only 3 games in the league this year.
Right.
But I guess, and that's the way it's been in a lot of years. But it's, they clinched the outright title. They celebrated the 500th win, which they got the week before. So they had some old coaches and old folks back from those eras that helped get to 500. So they celebrated that. Elliot Riegler had a huge game, rushed for 130 with 4 touchdowns, passed for a 5th touchdown, passed for 112 yards. He just had a great game for them, which it could be a good sign for them as they move closer to the playoffs.
And go ahead. Do you have something?
Riegler's the grandson of Dick Perry, who was a longtime coach here in different schools here. And
There's a deep dive.
Yeah.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah. And we talk about these schools where the names keep coming back. Perry certainly over at Catholic Central. Muskegon Catholic has an intriguing game this week. Centerville 6-1, and I kind of took a little bit of a deep dive here because I see the 6-1, and I'm wondering, is that one of those inflated 6-1s? And I still, after I did my deep dive, I still have no idea what's going on because they lose to Brandywine 38-32 to open the season. Then they run the table against schools like Schoolcraft, Hartford, Decatur, White Pigeon, Cassopolis, and Comstock. And out of those, I do know that Schoolcraft usually has a pretty competitive team. Not sure what the situation is this year. So what's your take on that Centerville Catholic matchup coming up?
Yeah, I think Schoolcraft's quite down from where they usually are. They've taken kind of a big hit this year, but Centerville was really good last year. They won the Division VIII state title. They gave up 29 points all year. Their defense has still done a pretty good job this year. I just can't imagine that they're in that same neighborhood of where they were last year. Catholic was supposed to play them last year in the non-league, and then things got rearranged with the reduced schedule, so they didn't get to play them. They're getting to play them now. I know that both teams are probably looking forward to that test, as the playoffs approach. But Centerville, they were anchored on defense last year. They still have a couple key pieces back from that team that rolled to the state title, but I still like Catholic in that game. But it's a good test, good tune-up for them, especially with Oak Ridge coming up next week for Catholic.
Yeah, I was going to say, you look at Catholic's schedule. I mean, they're certainly not backing into the playoffs. You got Centerville at 6-1, and then you got Oak Ridge. That's going to be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, certainly. As you were talking about deep diving, you were over a couple years ago. You wanted to dive in my kiddie pool.
It wasn't such a deep dive.
It wasn't that. So, but no, that's definitely those 2 games are really going to help Catholic here coming up.
Muskegon Heights winning by a 4-foot over Orchard View. Intriguing situation for them. I mean, they were on. You talk about feel-good stories. We were talking, weeks up to week 4, week 3, week 4 about Muskegon Heights, getting that program back after not having it last year, and then they really ran into that roadblock against Ludington. And I know Van Parker had made some, he had some concerns about, okay, I don't want to see my guys quitting or anything like that. And then they have the misfortune of having to play Catholic the next week, and that didn't go so well for them either. And now they have Carson City this week, and that's not going to be an easy one, certainly.
Oh, Carson City's 6-1.
Yeah.
They just suffered their first loss to Breckenridge, but Tim Swore, former Fox 17 guy, former North Point Christian coach. North Point's beaten Montague and Ravenna.
Back
teams
when they were
like
an
that.
11-player power.
Yep. So, he's done a good job at each stop, including in Florida. He was in Florida for a year as well. He's the Detroit Lions Coach of the Week last week, I believe, or the week before. And so that's what Heights is facing this week. And then they got McBain, which it's not the powerhouse of maybe the ones that have gotten to the state finals, but still no slouch. McBain's 4-3 right now, so that'll be another challenge for them.
We'll move to the CSAA Silver and focus on a couple of games there. Kent City taking it to White Cloud by the score of 50-14. And boy, Kent City has come a long way from what their opening week loss to Hart, right?
Well, yeah, they came back and beat Newaygo in the opener, and then week 2 went
yes.
up to Hart.
Right.
In a game that was kind of scheduled early in the week, something like
Yep,
that.
yep.
And were you at that game?
I was not, no.
Kent City Hart, because I know you cover Hart quite a bit.
I think we were at the same game watching on the phones. Like, what is going on
Yeah,
here?
because Kent City was 30. They were down 30-6 to Hart, which, if you kind of don't want to trash the CSA Silver, but at the same time, if you look at maybe strength of schedules, and I think I brought this up before, so the CSA folks are going to be like, all right, we got your point. You don't have to keep hitting it over the head.
Right.
But, Hart picked up a really nice win there and surprised a lot of us, and then Hart hasn't won since.
Sure.
I still think Kent City's the best team in that division, even though they're not winning the division. They had to take a forfeit loss to Morley because of some COVID issues and whatnot. But, Kent City has been rolling since.
Right.
They had to miss 2 games for different reasons. But yeah, so them. And then Holton. Holton's another team that they've kind of impressed me the way that they've bounced back from a season opening loss to Hart. So.
Yeah.
Their quarterback seems to be having a good season, but I'm with you too. I would certainly not slight against their quarterback, but I'd like to see what he can do in the West Michigan Conference, going against some of those defenses.
And you wonder what 3 of those schools in the Silver are going to do next year without a conference. As far as I know, the CSAA is not planning any major rejiggering to sort of make those Silver schools whole. So that's going to be a question mark for folks like Kent City.
Yeah, because they'll be losing some of those schools to the expanded West Michigan Conference, right?
Yeah, it'll be down to 3 schools, I think, and
Yeah, and I've
you
heard
can't have a
that.
conference.
Did you hear also? I think that's correct. That Belding's moving to the CSA,
Yes,
but that's for
I
the
believe
bigger division.
Belding's moving to the Gold, so that's not
Right.
going to help the Silver teams.
Right.
Okay. And then we'll mention some scores in the CSAA Gold. Big Rapids over Grant, 21-12. Fremont beating Chippewa Hills by the score of 32-6. So congratulations to the Packers on their first win of the season. Tri-County, they keep moving along there. 16-6 over Central Montcalm, and Reed City. They seem to be the class of that division, obviously at 50-13 over Newaygo.
Yeah, Reed City hosting Whitehall next week.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting from that standpoint. All right, now we get the chance to spend the next several minutes on the West Michigan Conference as we're going to focus on the Battle of the Bell with Montague taking on Whitehall. Before we do that, though, we had Montague and Oak Ridge winning by forfeit last week. Whitehall winds up handling Hart, no surprise there, but 46-6. Whitehall played some very, very good football after their loss to Oak Ridge.
They did, and they get contributions from a lot of different guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're a very balanced team, but you can't deny the season that Alec Pruitt's had.
Right.
He was pushing 200 yards again, coming off that 308-yard game against Ludington. He's just having a monster season, but their defense is playing incredibly well, especially since that Oak Ridge game where they lost 32-19. Since that game, they've only allowed 6 points total.
So that kind of woke them up a little bit, to say the least.
I mean, it better.
Yeah.
If Montague wants to win.
Yeah. Your thoughts on the Whitehall Hart game?
Yeah, I mean, Scott mentioned Pruitt, just the big story. He's pushing 1,200 yards right now. He's averaging 10.7 a carry, and like we mentioned, he's not rolling up these numbers on the dregs of the league. He's got 120 against Oak Ridge, 151 against Ravenna. He had 136 against Kalamazoo United in the opener. I mean, he's been doing this the whole year.
Right.
And between him and Nate Boley has 608 offensive yards this year. Kyle Stratton went over 200 yards for the first time passing. I mean, Whitehall's looking like a well-oiled machine right now.
Yeah, they really are. And I just want to get your comments, since that's kind of your wheelhouse with that area with the Hart Pirates. I know Cal and I, we covered the Ravenna Hart game, and one-sided score. But I'm going to tell you what, the Hart played down to down. I mean, they didn't give up. I mean, you can really, at least from our standpoint, I think, is especially with the expansion of the West Michigan Conference coming up, I really am encouraged by Joe Tanis over there, what he's got going, the great coaching staff. I mean, you look at the resume of the coaches that he's got on that team. I mean, the kids still have to play the game, obviously, but from being close to that area, and maybe closer to the program than any of us, what are you hearing from Hart? Reason for optimism?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't help but be optimistic. This is a team that, previously when they played in Oak Ridge or Whitehall, it's going to be 70-0 or whatever, and they're going to be calling off the dogs in the third quarter. But, Whitehall, Tanis took a lot of pride in the fact that Whitehall had to leave their starters in most of the game, right up until the fourth quarter. They scored on them, which no one else is doing, and they didn't do it at the end of the game. I think the score made it 21-6, so it's not like it was out of hand already at that point. And they're 2-5 right now. They got Shelby this week, which is a game we figure they have a good chance to win. White Cloud after that, which we know from experience they can beat a team from the Silver.
Right.
So if they get those, that's 4-5. They haven't bettered 4-5 this century. So for them to go 4-5. And with the new conference coming in, huge step forward. It's only going to drive participation, get the numbers even higher than they already are.
The game we covered on the Greater Muskegon Sports Network last year was Ravenna 17, North Muskegon 6. And that was an interesting game, Cal. It started out with North Muskegon actually leading 6-0, and then they lost their quarterback. James Young went out with a shoulder injury, I believe.
Yeah, his dad told me it was a broken collarbone, a clean break, and fortunately, everything else is good. He'll maybe 6 weeks or whatever, he'll be back for basketball, because he's also a very good basketball player. So that's good. You hope to see the young man come back healthy and everything. You hate to see injuries like that. And that game, though, it sounds like it was the Hunter Hogan show that you guys watched.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter is certainly an interesting player in terms of just he's never down, it seems like, Cal. I mean, like you said a couple of weeks ago, he broke like 8 tackles, and he runs hard. Ravenna played that game without 2 key members in that one too, so they wind up picking up a win with their shorthanded too. So
McCullough and Mabrino,
right?
Either one of them were in there.
Right.
Kind of the importance of that freshman quarterback here for North Muskegon. North Muskegon started out, I think, at the 11:53 mark in the first quarter. They scored at the 3:09 mark.
Yeah.
So they chewed up like 9 minutes off of that clock, and we're going off. When we're in breaks, I'm like going, here we go. Defense wins the game. Defense wins championships, and I'm like, this is going to be a battle all night, for 48 minutes. And then all of a sudden, their quarterback goes down. Belmonte has to come in, does a great job playing quarterback / running back / hybrid guy now all of a sudden, and he played really well. Played hard. They all played hard. The Norsemen did. They battled them, which you can tell by only allowing 17.
Yeah, they're playing in a system that the coach Witham said does not suit Belmonte's talents at all, and I think he still completed 12 of 21. That's not bad for a guy who had no idea what he was going to be doing when they woke up that morning.
North Muskegon and Ravenna, they played some great games. In fact, that series is really tight throughout history. And by the way, you're talking about the new divisions next year. Mm-hmm. You got to believe going in at least that those two are going to probably be the front runners early on, at least. Yeah. North Muskegon and Ravenna contending for maybe that divisional title, at least in the early going.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine it will only be one blue team.
Right, instead of 3 in a row.
Yeah, sure. Well, Hogan accounted for all 17 of their points too. He scored on a touchdown reception, a touchdown run, and a field goal, and he kicked the PATs as well. So
yeah, he's definitely a fun individual to watch, and certainly a key member of that Bulldog team.
But they're going to need McCullough back, and they're going to need Mabrino back.
Totally.
Ravenna will to go up against Oak Ridge.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's going to be a big game this week for those guys, and an interesting one as well. And I guess it depends on we've said it before with Oak Ridge being a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde. Don't know what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. I mean, if everything's equal, Oak Ridge probably should be okay on that one, but if a lot's going to be on how healthy I think Ravenna is going into that one.
Oak Ridge bouncing back from not playing last week it'll be interesting to see how they respond to that too. Whether it's a rest thing and they're come out better, or whether it's a hangover thing and
Because
they
we've
don't
seen
start
that.
well.
We saw that when they came out against Montague, and
Right.
I mean, you don't want to take away from Montague the way they played that night and expose some things against Oak Ridge, but that's one thing that Kerry Harger said. It goes, yeah, because I asked about it afterwards. How much of a factor was that not playing the week before you ran into Montague as well? Because I mean, very possibly, just because no matter how much you want to stress to your kids, focus and all this stuff, there's a tendency to kind of let down because you don't have that game that week, and you try to ramp it back up for a really tough opponent. Same situation this week.
Sure. Well, and that leads us perfectly into this matchup, the Battle of the Bell, and Montague does have that bye week because they won by a forfeit. So although I'm thinking of having to get up for a game or whatever, I'm not seeing that being an issue this week. I mean, I don't, I mean, if you can't get up for, like I say, if you can't get up for this one, you can't get up for any of them. So I guess your guys, let's start with Andy here. This is, again, his wheelhouse on this big matchup. It's a matchup that for the last several years has been owned by Montague, but for different times it has been certainly an interesting matchup. And it's, with rivalries too, it's always tough to get one team and another team at the same level.
Right.
So there's one team rebuilding, one team doing better, and you get those years over the years where that's happening. I think what's interesting about this year, guys, and see if you agree with me, and I'll start with you on this, Andy, is you're looking at two teams that can kind of look each other in the eye this year.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the recent history, and like you mentioned, when they're at the same level, the Montague's won 6 in a row in the series, but 3 of those were classic games.
Yes.
I mean, 2015, Montague wins by 1. Coach Pat Collins goes for 2 on the first touchdown of the game. It ends up being the difference. 2017, 46-44. At one point, 3 straight plays from scrimmage went to the end zone.
Yeah.
It ended up being half of the points Montague gave up in their first 11 games.
Right.
I mean, they were dominant, and Whitehall was right with them. And then, of course, last year, I think we all remember that one, double overtime, and Andrew Cooey kicks the winning field goal. So we have plenty of evidence to show this is going to be a tremendous game. And, it's going to come down to, I think, the lines. Alec Pruitt, Dylan Everett, those guys have been the bell cows for their teams all year. I think whichever one is more effective stopping the other is going to be in a really good position.
Your thoughts, Cal?
Well, my first thought, and I love where you're going with this, but my first thought, the first thing I wrote down, week off, question mark, Montague, because we've seen what happened to Oak Ridge. We're back up about 6 weeks ago. Here's my whole key. Here's all my thoughts I'm going to pour into 30 seconds.
That's usually the case,
I
Cal.
know.
That's nothing new.
This game will be won by these 10 players. For Montague, McDonald, Winkleman, Jancic, Brassfield, and Booth. For Whitehall, Reevy, Cook, Napier, Russell, and Vin Patton. The 5 guys on the offensive line for both teams. I think whatever offensive line performs the best, I think that team wins it. John?
Well, I can sum up my thought. No, exactly. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think it's going to come down to that type of a game. It's going to be, I'm looking forward to it, to say the least.
So if you want all the thoughts in my head, that'll take about 10 seconds. So I can't match up with Cal in that department. But no, it's emotion always plays such a huge deal. And I know you could say, well, yeah, whoever makes the bigger mistakes, whoever makes fewer mistakes, of course, that's like most games, right? But, to me, as an outsider to this, I didn't play in either program. I've covered both teams a little bit, but to me, the dynamic just looks like Montague comes into that game maybe expecting to win, and Whitehall maybe not as much.
Yeah.
They're fully capable, and they want to win,
Right.
but there's just something different a little bit about the mentalities, and that doesn't mean anything for this year because these are some of the same kids, but it's a different year. You can't, just because one thing worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to work again.
Right.
I just wonder what the psychology is going into it. Like, who's going to be more loose? Who's going to? I mean, of course, we're guilty of it too at CatchMark here of manufacturing some hype for it.
Right.
And we're just trying to build it up, but that's a big part of it is who handles the hype better too.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have a unique perspective, and you kind of hit on that. You're from Ravenna. You played in these. Give us a highlight. Give us, a personal highlight for you playing against either Oak Ridge or Montague, being from Ravenna.
Watching from the bench, does that count? Yeah, I played freshman year, I played junior year, I didn't play sophomore, senior years, but I've been around the sport just even when I wasn't playing, just on the sideline watching, and it was just it's just against those teams, you better bring it.
Yeah.
You better, tighten that chin strap, as they say, because that's not for the meek, and it's just, I don't know. I just think between that and the atmosphere, it's just something special about it. I mean, those are always kind of the four teams in the top of the league.
Sure.
North Muskegon was right there too, obviously, but in terms of Whitehall and Montague, Montague's changed so much even since I was in school. Like back then, they weren't much at all.
Right.
And Whitehall was probably the tougher team at the point.
Yeah.
But going through that, they both had their moments, but Montague's been, they got 3 state titles, and the rest is history. And Whitehall, I think, has been always kind of considered the sleeping giant in the league by a lot of people, because you knew they always had the athletes and everything. You just wondered, they just needed to put it all together. I think Tony Sigma's done a great job in getting that back, kind of getting them on the right track. Maybe some more than anything consistency, and I think it's time for them to take the next step.
And I'm going to be intrigued by seeing how their young quarterback at Whitehall has matured. We saw that in the game. Was that the Oak Ridge game?
Yes.
That all of a sudden we said, "Wow, this young man is." I mean, he comes in. He's a sophomore. He's learning the system, so he's going to make some sophomore mistakes. But boy, he really, from that time on, he really really looked like he was taking charge of that team and becoming his team.
Kind of almost grew up during the game.
Yeah.
Different times. Yeah, I thought he improved even from the first snap to the last snap.
Right. I think key, as you'd mentioned, Andy, I think we all did, is it's an intriguing matchup when you just take the running backs of Dylan Everett for Montague, and you take Pruitt for Whitehall. But look at the receivers. You got Bowley. I mean, that guy's big play guy, offense, defense. You got Red Watson. I'm going to name him. Forget a few guys here. But what I'm saying is they got 4 solid receivers that a young man with a strong arm can throw to. You got pretty much the same deal on the Montague side of the ball. You got 4 guys that can catch. You put Blankstrom in. He's kind of like their slash. He comes in as a running back a little bit, but he also move him at tight end. Sometimes they move him as a wide out. A lot of weapons there, that's for sure.
The offenses are almost like looking in a mirror. The only real major difference is maybe the experience level of the quarterbacks, because Kyle is a sophomore at Whitehall.
Right.
Cooey, first season starting, granted, but he's kicked in this game. He knows what it takes to win it, and he's a senior. I would never presume to make a pick in this game because I think it's impossible to pick, but that might be something that favors Montague.
Interesting, and see what you guys think of this. I'm thinking of the factor of you've had Montague that's kind of dominated the last 6 or so years, right? I mean, I say dominated, all the scores have been close, don't get me wrong, but still, it's in the win column. How much is a factor is Whitehall just saying, I don't want to say wanting it more, but all of a sudden saying, we are ready to win this thing. Do you see that as a factor? Maybe more hungry?
If they're not hungry from last year, they'll never be hungrier, because they had that game. I'm sure they felt they had that game won when they scored a touchdown. I think it was a minute and a half or something to go, and Drew Collins comes down and leads on the field goal drive to force the overtime. So that has to sting with them.
I talked to Tony Sigmund at practice yesterday, and I asked him, how many times do you think you had that game won last year? He goes, well, really just one time, and that was when they scored late. He goes, then we kicked it off, and it was a touchback, and we're like, all right, we're going to make them, there's how many seconds, 90 seconds left or whatever. We're in good shape, but then there's a flag on the kickoff. And then Montague ends up with better field position, and then all of a sudden he goes, all bets are off now.
Sure.
And then, of course, Montague comes down and ties it, sends it to double overtime. But that game was something else last year. That was incredible. The play that really sticks out to me still, even though they lost, was Nate Boley. It's 4th and forever. They were on their side of the field, and after the
28-yard line or something.
Yeah, he bust one for like a 77-yard touchdown run down the sideline, and we're all kind of looking at each other like, what just happened?
You're right.
And we asked Tony after the game, we're like, that took a lot of guts for you to call that fake punt. He goes, that wasn't a fake punt. That was Bully making a call on his own. He just took it and ran.
And I guess we should have seen this coming because he's done it this year with the picked up of that punt against, I think it was Kalamazoo.
Oak Ridge, yeah.
Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
And I was at the Ludington game. He almost did it again. He ran up to the ball as the Ludington was going to down it, and they did down it. But you almost feel like he's using that now to psych out the other team on the punt
That kid's
coverage.
fearless, isn't he?
Sure. Yeah.
And there is one thing we keep forgetting about on Friday night, and it's one word: weather. It's supposed to rain tomorrow. It's supposed to be nice. Rain tomorrow night, and then there's kind of chances of rain the rest of the week. What's what's it? Whitehall. I've never seen that field in poor shape.
Right.
That
Absolutely.
grounds over at Whitehall always does a nice job of having that field ready to go. So I'm going to assume it's ready to go. But I've also know of a sprinkler incident that we hit on earlier.
Well, rain or no rain, it won't dampen any crowd atmosphere, I tell you. I go to that game every year and unmatched in terms of the games, at least that I go to,
And
for
I'm
crowds.
not sure that, I don't know if the rain, who that helps more. That doesn't, I mean, who
I
do
don't
you
think
give
it
the edge
changes
to?
much. If anything, I feel like I beat the drum on this all the time, but Kyle Stratton is so great when the play breaks down and he has to make something happen by himself. Maybe a play is more likely to break down in the rain, and he's able to do something with that. I don't know.
I know. I just happen to think of it being a farmer.
Yeah.
Sitting here, weather that might play into this.
Yeah.
Also.
It really could. And another interesting side note to this is, a new coach in this rivalry, and Justin Dennett from Montague. And I talked to him a little bit about this too. I said, coming over, I said, you're obviously not a fool. You're around football, so you know that there's rivalry there. We said, but you're right. I really didn't know the depth and magnitude of this rivalry, so he's having to learn that a little bit too. Does that play into this at all somewhere?
It does, and I think it can be a plus and a minus. It can be a plus from the standpoint of you don't put too much on it. And I asked him about that yesterday. I said, how much of this is, there's a lot of hype around this game, how much of it is getting your guys to just really focus in on what they have to do and not get swept away in all the pomp and circumstance, so to speak. So he thought that's a huge part of this.
And I mentioned earlier the 2015 game where Coach Collins, they go for two on that first touchdown they score. I think they ended up winning 29-28 with that 2-point conversion being the difference. It was something that I don't think someone who doesn't have a great feel for not only his own team, but Whitehall's team from having been around the rivalry for so long would have necessarily done. So I don't, not that that's going to make a difference in the game, but it's an interesting, approach to it here.
And he's not from here.
Yep.
Pat Collins was from here. Pat Collins knows this rivalry. He comes in first year. Everybody's telling him, hey, it's a big game. He's like, we've just played a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
You're not going to...
I beat Oak Ridge. Now you're telling me I have to beat Whitehall?
Yeah. So, I mean, he may feel less pressure.
Yeah.
He may feel less pressure than what Pat would have going into this.
Yeah.
Because he's just not from here.
It's kind of an interesting dynamic. You touched on it, Scott, was the fact that you almost got the players or the kids saying, "Hey, coach, this is this is what we do around here." So it's almost like there's kind of an education factor from the coaches of how much this, like I said, he's not a dummy. He realizes there's a rivalry there, but he's kind of seeing it from afar as opposed to being right in the middle of it.
Probably got an education last week when Montague's football team brought the bell to the soccer game in hopes of beating Whitehall for the first time. It didn't work out, but I'm sure they learned. I'm sure that any new coach has learned a lot from that experience.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we've only got a couple of seconds left here, and so any final thoughts? I know next week we're going to pretty much try to focus on draw up the playoffs a little bit here and find out where we think people are going and see how close we come.
Yeah, that'll be interesting on that topic, on the playoff topic, because you look at it, it's so different. I think myself, I'm even thinking, 6 wins, yeah, that's right, it doesn't matter. The win total doesn't matter as much, only from the standpoint of you need the wins to rack up the playoff bonus points and so forth. But yeah, it'll be I'll be looking to sit down more and start crunching some of that stuff and paying more attention to it.
And go ahead. I'll let you
Oh, go for it. I haven't lined up my shot yet.
There's going to be less suspense for teams that are borderline. Are we going to be 3-4 or are we going to be 5-6? Now going in. I can. Different times schools are like, oh my gosh, are we going to be 4? Are we going to be 5? Are we going to go? Are we going to host? Are we going to be on the road?
Are we going to go north?
Are we going to go? I'm like, we're going to go north.
Yeah, right.
Bill Butler's going. I want to go north.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that suspense is gone now.
I will say, though, if you're like a Coopersville, maybe you don't want to know because they're Division III this year. Guess who they might have to run into? A team called the Big Reds.
Yeah. And Andy, take us home.
Yeah, the suspense, like you mentioned, isn't there. You know, the field doesn't change. You know, week to week. I remember under the old system, week to week, the field would change drastically based on who Snooze to You, the guy who runs that wonderful mapatology site, projects to qualify through their 6 wins or whatever it takes. Now we pretty much know everyone that's got a real good chance right now. The field, and certainly in terms of who's playing who, like Spring Lake Whitehall field, like that's locked in already, even though there's 2 more weeks left to go.
If you ever get a chance, if your local school's doing a party, whether they call watch party or, you know, playoff watch party or whatever, those are fun to go to. Because, you know, if they invite the community in, some do, some don't. Some make it just very private, the players and maybe the coaches. But you get those communities that invite everybody in. Those are fun to go, actually fun to go to.
Yeah, I've done that. It is a lot of fun. It's just, that's really what it's all about, don't you think? At the end of the day, it's
It all comes
about
out of
bringing all those
community.
people together, and it's the community, and it's the excitement of just playing high school football, really.
And that's what we always like about it, or love about it, is the fact that, that's, you know, this is a lot of our town's pro teams. This is what you're at the coffee shop, you're supporting them, and that's what it's all about. All right, that's going to do it for us. Old clock on the wall. I want to thank Billy Mann for keeping us in line, as he always does a fantastic job here at CatchMark. So, again, Andy, thanks for stopping in. I'm sure we'll be seeing you, running into you down. Appreciate you stopping by. And Scott, always a pleasure with you, and even you, Cal. It's good to do it. I got to watch it. I'm John Russell. Have yourself a good night, everyone.